Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Welcome back to the Blockchain Show. Today, we have a fascinating conversation with Debbie Soon, an investor, entrepreneur, and Web3 expert who's been at the forefront of blockchain innovation, digital art, and creator empowerment. Debbie co-founded Hug, a platform that helped tens of thousands of artists monetize their work through crypto, and recently led its successful acquisition. She's also the author of Digital Mavericks, a book that dives into the evolving world of blockchain, NFTs, and AI, exploring how these technologies are reshaping industries and creating new opportunities for creators. In this episode, Debbie shares her journey from traditional finance to the crypto space, what it means to be a digital maverick, and how blockchain is revolutionizing the art world. We also discuss the intersection of AI and Web3, the role of regulation in crypto's future, and how creators can find their purpose in this rapidly evolving landscape. So whether you're new to blockchain or already deep in the space, this conversation is packed with valuable insights. Debbie Soon, welcome to the Blockchain Show. Thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of interesting things happening in the world right now, but I suppose maybe the best way to get started here, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and briefly bringing us up to speed onto how you got into the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Debbie. I'm Singapore born and raised, actually started my career as a investor in the traditional finance space. Spent about 7 years kind of investing in consumer and consumer tech companies before kind of transitioning into the world of live sports. And then somehow through all of that, when moving from Singapore to the US, really started developing a love for crypto. And I think a lot of that was kind of fueled by the need to meet and connect with people during the pandemic. I've been actively involved in the crypto space over the past 4 to 5 years. I have, overspent the past 3 years kind of building a company called Hug with my co-founder, Randi Zuckerberg. That company just recently got acquired by the .art domain registry. But yeah, we've been using, through that company, we have empowered tens of thousands of creators, brought them on chain, showed them kind of like the power of crypto in order to monetize their work in new and different ways. And I've also had the pleasure of, working very, very closely with a lot of these artists, fellow founders, and I capture a lot of their stories in my book that I recently published called Digital Mavericks.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What an incredible endeavor it is to write a book. I don't think people realize just how difficult that is. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about like when you decided you wanted to write, maybe for those who are interested in finding and reading the book, what they can expect to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think writing the book Odyssey kind of came totally by chance. So, when I first really kind of started being active in crypto around 2021, to be honest, didn't really know much. I was just, here to show up as a community participant, as a community member. I just wanted to, kind of document and share my learnings publicly. It just felt like the best way to hold myself accountable. I started a Twitter, now X account from scratch, basically just started posting and sharing a lot of my thoughts there. I guess that started getting quite a bit of traction in, 2022 or so. And I actually got approached by my publisher, Wiley, during that period, asking if I had ever thought of writing a book. And the answer was no. And it so happened that we were in the middle of doing a fundraise for Hug at a time. So I kind of turned down the opportunity. But I guess 6 months later, I was like, oh man, I feel like I'll be remiss to not give that a go. And so I reached back out. Of whether to see if writing a book would still be an option. And I guess my perspective on, writing it was to come from a place of really focusing on the stories, because I feel like the biggest thing that I have taken away, aside from how exciting the technology is really all of the connections that have been formed. And so, I know there's a lot of books out there that kind of go into detail on, what is the blockchain and what blockchain can do. And I just felt like I don't really come from a technical background, but what I'm really good at and what I'm really passionate about is storytelling. And so the book is really a 50% guide on, how to get into crypto, even if you have no idea what it is today, and showing that it is a place for everyone. And the other half of it is really focused on the beautiful stories of, like I mentioned, artists, founders, investors, people who, pretty much led lives like each and every one of us, but along their journey discovered something that really resonated with them. And as a result, are carving their path in this space.
Yeah, very good. I like that term digital maverick. For some people, they may read about it and think, well, why can't I do that? So if you wouldn't mind explaining a little bit more, like what does it mean to be a digital maverick, why that's important in today's digital landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my perspective of being a digital maverick doesn't mean that you have to be first. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you have to be, maybe in some sense, you have to be a little bit early, but I think early is relative. My definition of someone who is a digital maverick is someone who is willing to take some level of risks, who is willing to play an active role in this increasingly digital economy and world that we live in, even if the rules have not really clearly been set, or even if the technology continues to evolve. So, I feel like the people that I've spoken to, obviously, there are people that have been in the space for a really long time, call it, over 10 years. There are people that have, similarly to me, really started diving in only in the past kind of 4 years. And I still feel like someone who doesn't know what crypto is today could also kind of take their mark as a digital maverick. And a lot of the times I want to get people to think about what is it about this internet world or this internet revolution that they want to be a part of. Like, why are they interested in playing a role? And I always kind of joke about how there are many different ways to make an impact on the world, right? We could try and solve climate change, we could try and look for a cure for cancer. Obviously there are other ways, but at the same time, there is such a great movement going on here where if you want to be a part of this kind of new internet, if you want to play a role in shaping it, we are early enough where somebody could jump in right now in 2025 and really leave their mark on it over the next several years.
Yeah. No, it's very inspiring, encouraging. When you talk about a Web3 toolkit, that's something that, when I think about people new to the space, kind of getting their head around it, I guess maybe you could expand or explain that to us, like what are 3 essential skills or tools someone needs to navigate this space?
Yeah, and it's funny. I think that chapter in my book where it's kind of like, what do you need to get started? And I already prefaced that chapter. I knew that as I was writing it, this would probably be the very first chapter that would be outdated. And that's always a challenge, I think, about writing a book about any kind of topic in emerging tech, just because it evolves so quickly. There's news coming out every single day. And obviously, if you're publishing traditionally, there is like a time to print, time from submitting a final manuscript to it actually being on the shelves. But yeah, I felt like when I wrote that piece, I was, okay, you need to obviously find some way of acquiring crypto, which would be through a centralized exchange like a Coinbase or a Binance or a Kraken, depending on which country you're in. So that, for the most part, I believe that doesn't change, though increasingly there are more ways to really easily acquire crypto. You can purchase crypto with your credit card through various infrastructure providers like MoonPay, for example. So even that in itself doesn't seem like a must-have. And then I remember even then I'm talking about self-custodial wallets, where in the past and I wrote this. I wrote this, kind of through 2023 into 2024. You needed to write down these unwieldy seed phrases in order to really self-custody. And I mean, that means having full ownership over your assets. And these days, there's a lot of other wallet infrastructure providers that makes it easy for you to set up a wallet and not necessarily needing to know how it works. So I always say that bit was, and I was hoping for it to be the first to be outdated. But in terms of kind of where we're at today, it's easier than ever, honestly, to kind of participate in the on-chain economy. And when I say on-chain, it's just that it's similar to thinking about, several years ago when people started getting access to the internet, more and more people started going online. And today it's just that more and more people are going on-chain. So, with on-chain being the new online. And so it is easier than ever. There are a lot of consumer-friendly applications out there, whether you're looking for games, whether you're looking for media sharing platforms, whether you're looking for social networks, whether you're looking for like banking platforms. It is just so much easier today that where you can sign up in a really familiar process, through email and password, but you're actually already kind of participating and owning assets on the blockchain.
Yeah, that's excellent. I feel like you do a really good job explaining the space. Something that comes up a lot when I speak to people new to like NFTs, for example, there's just a lot of like misconceptions about it. I was wondering if you could share like some common misconceptions with our listeners, not only about NFTs, but Web3 or anything that you feel like kind of needs to be cleared up.
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. I feel like, headlines are meant to drive clicks. There are a lot of headlines out there that are clickbait and very much associate crypto with the concept of scams, or all crypto is scam, like it's fake internet money and all of that. I feel like I always have to remind people that scams are happening everywhere. I believe people are still getting scammed by email phishing. Maybe they're a little bit more sophisticated than the email from a Nigerian prince, but there's still phishing scams going on. There's still identity theft happening. There's still people trying to call you and get you to share your passwords. There's people trying to trick you by selling you fake tickets. There's scams everywhere, right? So just to kind of label crypto equals scam, I feel is probably the biggest public misconception, and that it's just something that media outlets feel like, oh, it's going to get people really riled up about something that they don't really understand. So I'll say that's the first thing, that crypto, just like anything else in life, you have to be careful. If it's something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So that's one thing. Second, I know you mentioned NFTs, and it doesn't necessarily have to relate to that, but I feel the industry probably did a pretty bad job in terms of kind of framing NFTs as if it is its own market, when really it is just a foundational technology. And another analogy that I like to use is, for those of us who were around back in the day and we used to download MP3s, illegally through like Napster and LimeWire. And back then, the vernacular was very much like, oh, what MP3s did you download? What MP3s are you listening to? In reality, MP3s are just a file format, and it was really what kind of music are you listening to? And so, NFTs are kind of similar in that sense that, there is this, through bad communication or bad storytelling or otherwise, people kind of bucket NFTs, which is a foundational technology, into a single term, when in reality, it is just a way of, tokenizing, or a way of representing ownership of something digitally and on the blockchain. So what I mean by that is that your tickets could be NFTs, right? So right now, if you've been to a concert recently or any kind of event and you use Ticketmaster, those are digital tickets, right? Hardly anybody kind of carries physical tickets to get scanned. It's just that they're owned by, if Ticketmaster goes down, there's no way that you can kind of prove that you own those tickets. But we could similarly take those tickets, put them on chain, they become an NFT, and you can prove, irrefutably that those tickets are yours. Similarly, the California DMV has started putting car title deeds on chain, and those car title deeds are essentially NFTs as well. So again, they're not NFTs. You're not going to call them car title deed NFTs. They're just your car title deeds. The only difference is in the way that they're being recorded. So I think those are kind of like those two common misconceptions. I feel like over time, a lot of the technology, a lot of these like fancy terms are going to be abstracted away. Similarly to how we don't really think too much about things being on the cloud anymore. It's almost like a certain kind of expectation that it is, and it's available, through the internet.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating. Because I live in California, so hopefully they can figure out how to just eliminate needing to go to the DMV soon.
Oh yeah. I would love that too.
Something I really like in your book is the idea of inclusivity. And I really like that about blockchain in general, is it doesn't really matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like. It's just code. There are still some barriers for people, who are creators, just in general, it's not easy to get your creations out to the world. And then, once you put in the work and you're ready to share it with the world, maybe you could share, some of the barriers that people do face, specifically if they're underrepresented in Web3 and how can we address that? How can we help them to succeed?
I would say in general, yes. I do feel like the blockchain has opened up a lot of opportunities for creators, all over the world. The ability to even accept payments through stable coins, so say in USDC versus local currency, is especially vital for countries in which they're experiencing, really high inflation. So, definitely it is the step in the right direction towards, a more open and inclusive, both financial and creator economy. I think naturally there are still issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, like in the space as there is, these are, systemic issues that don't really kind of get resolved overnight. And, I think in today's day and age, sometimes it seems like DEI is almost like a bad word. And it's like, we are not allowed to talk about it. But, what I've personally seen is that, again, just like how getting access to an internet connection has opened up a lot of the world to people who may not have known about it before, kind of going further in that direction, going into Web3, I think opens new forms of monetization that creators had previously not been able to access. So, I think for the longest time, we have all been posting and sharing our content on Instagram or on Twitter or on, all of these different platforms all for free. And, that famous documentary where, it says that if you're not paying for the product, it means that you're the product. And, we're essentially being monetized, like whatever we're contributing to the platform is actually being monetized. And, I've seen different models that obviously are still evolving where, like platforms like Zora or Rodeo, for example, people can share their creations. And, maybe for now they are getting, quite a couple of dollars or, $5 or something for posting a piece of content. But the alternative is that they would have posted it on Instagram for free anyway. So why not, kind of see what models are available to you, especially if you're an artist, if you are a content creator, and kind of exploring of different methods of sharing your work with the world. And so yeah, like I think that what this has done has just really been able to level the playing field in some sense, not entirely. There's still a lot of work to go, and there's still a lot of systemic kind of biases inherent in crypto as is. It's still a very male-dominated industry, and that's just gender on one part of it. But, definitely kind of a step in the right direction in terms of the opportunities that we're offering to people.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Do you have any examples of like an artist or entrepreneur who's found financial freedom in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I cover a whole bunch of them in my book too. There is an AI collaborative artist called Claire Silver, who was unfortunately diagnosed with a chronic condition earlier in her life. And through, I think this is, a story about both AI and the blockchain, but, was able to work collaboratively with AI to create, stunning pieces of work that, is also in the permanent collection of the LACMA, has been sold at Sotheby's and Christie's, and she has been able to make a mark for herself in terms of being a really renowned artist. And now she's a full-time artist, bringing her work all around the world. But yes, several stories like that. Even one of the artists that I cover in my book, his name is Food Masku. He makes food masks, and he makes masks out of food and puts them on his face, and and then takes photographs of them. So it's actually really an analog. It's an analog piece of art, right? Like it's actual physical, tangible items that he's putting on his face and then taking a photo of it, and that photo then happens to be a digital photo. But people are buying and collecting his work on chain. So again, as a way for him to kind of monetize his work. Whereas in the past, what would have happened was that people would kind of steal his concepts or repost his work without permission, and they're getting a whole bunch of impressions. They're getting paid out, paid out by TikTok and everything. Meanwhile, like audiences of that content don't have the full context or don't really understand like what he is trying to say as an artist. So I definitely plenty of stories. Again, I want to be clear that it's not that being on chain or selling your work as NFTs as mutually exclusive to, other ways of monetization. I think I've always looked at being on chain as one of many different ways and a way to kind of diversify one's revenue streams. So like whether you're a writer, whether you're a painter, whether you're a photographer, or whether you're just any kind of like, content creator that, posts like memes and everything, exploring how the blockchain could be additive to your revenue, could be additive to your community, could be additive to your audience, is something that, I definitely think is worth exploring.
Yeah. My first thought was like, it'd be great if there was almost like a way for creators to kind of like route all of their content through an NFT and distribute it out to like the various like TikToks, Instagram, stuff like that. I don't really know how TikTok works. Like, I don't know how people are making money on it, but it'd be really cool, if they were to make money, it goes to this address. It's all on chain. And because I think a lot about how to like monetize things like this podcast, which I have failed epically at making any money on this show in like 8 years, but it's more like a thought process of like, how can you set up micro transactions? How can you send out extra content that's not available to regular people? Or like when you mentioned like a book, if you want to do a second edition, how can you push that updated book to someone? There's just like an endless amount of possibilities once things are digital. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I think the future is going to be really cool for people who are tech savvy and like, just the possibilities. I'm sorry for just rambling there.
No, not at all. And I mean, I think there are ways that people are launching podcasts on chain and putting it, making it available for people to collect. So, there are definitely a couple of podcasts that are doing that already. And again, like, jury's still out, obviously, as to like how much revenue that could create or sustain. But I think just one way of thinking about it is that, rather than kind of, the traditional kind of monetization model for podcasts is obviously through, advertising and brands. But, there is an obvious inefficiency there from like, even if you had like a whole bunch of listeners, not every single listener is going to convert into kind of a buy of that brand. And obviously there is kind of that intermediary, and you as a content creator are not actually kind of monetizing from the people that are listening to your, content in the first place. And they probably don't even want ads, right? Like, I'm sure there are like ways to get around like having to listen to ads on podcasts. And so, I think what the blockchain offers is a way, is an easier way for, content creators, whether you're a podcast host or whether you're a writer, to have people really collect your work because they really like it. And, really build a direct connection with the audience. And, we always talk about that 1,000 true fans, and whether we can kind of get to that. And obviously, what it does on chain is just that facilitating that, micro transactions is now easier than ever. And, that again, in the beginning, it could be just cents, but, over time, it's exciting to think about how that could continue to evolve.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, again, a lot of great possibilities. Brings me to the point of like navigating what's to come. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to share about people finding their momentum in blockchain, what's going to come next.
Yeah. I think one thing that, I will always just kind of advise someone who's like probably new to the space is just kind of figuring out like what your why is and exactly what gets you excited about, being on the blockchain. And again, it could just be being part of something early and like just being more knowledgeable than the rest of the people at the dinner table. It could very much be, kind of exploring and experimenting with new monetization models like we just talked about as a creator. It could be about like, just kind of meeting different folks who, have a whole wide range of perspectives in terms of, what they're seeing and what they're interacting with every day. I personally feel like I don't really want to be left behind, and I would rather be one of the first and the earliest to the table. And so, I think that's what has kind of kept me really kind of focused in the space and learning and experimenting, and also recognizing that, to be honest, a lot of people here are figuring things out as they go along. That's what happens when you're early in an industry. And there's still a lot of room for infrastructure and technology to catch up, but increasingly, I think we're getting to that point. So yeah, I feel, I think if there's anything that I want people to take away from this conversation is to not necessarily be put off by just the term crypto. I know it just comes with a lot of like negative connotations as is. But again, if there are ways that you feel like you can participate, you don't have to be a developer. I'm not technical at all. You could, really just kind of dive in and get your feet wet.
We were talking about in the future, surviving what's next to come. I think AI is pretty big on people's minds last year or two. Regulation, we've got pretty crazy government going on in this country. What trends do you think people should pay attention to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not. I know that in itself is another controversial topic that a lot of people feel strongly about in one way or the other. But I think clearly it's just only getting more and more powerful. And so similar to what I tell people about crypto is that you could either choose to fight it or resist it, or you could learn how to work better with it and better make it a part of your life and be more productive, or however way you want to use it. So I mean, definitely AI is something to look out for. I think we are seeing this emergence of what people call AI agents, where these are AI operated agents that are acting autonomously, and they have wallets, which crypto allows them to do, so they're able to handle transactions on your behalf. So I know someone who has built basically like an AI bot or AI powered bot that tries to optimize a sports bets every single day. So that's pretty interesting. Obviously some of these use cases are still a little speculative in nature, but it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens when people start leaning into what AI could do. The other thing that I always like to say about AI is that, recently with ChatGPT launching its kind of image generation, and, people creating all of these Studio Ghibli recreations of themselves. And, there is talk of, this is, so unethical where none of these, all of these images are being created and nothing goes back to the original creator, Miyazaki-san, who is behind Studio Ghibli. And so, I think obviously that in itself is potentially a gray area, but blockchain and being able to register and acknowledge where the origination of the IP is allows for us to track where that came from. Obviously, we require a lot of work to register all existing IP onto the blockchain. So, that's some stuff to figure out there. But imagine a world where if his IP was kind of registered on the blockchain and there were AI models that were trained on that, there is a way to prove, I guess they call it provenance, but there is a way to prove, where that AI model has learned has learned from. And that could be a world where every time an image is generated, it gives back, micro royalty payments to the original creator behind that. So, a lot of the concerns that people have about AI can actually be solved by blockchain. So I'm excited to kind of see how that evolves. And then I guess the other thing to obviously look out for, we live in a very interesting regulatory environment right now, definitely much more pro-crypto than in previous administration. I think the specifics are still a little vague here, but, I think the good thing at least is that it is creating an environment that fosters innovation. So, and little less ambiguity about what is legal and what isn't. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what founders and builders and operators decide to do with that.
Yeah, man, that is so interesting. Just in closing, what's next for you? Any exciting projects on the horizon? And also, if you wouldn't mind telling us where people can get a copy of your book, Digital Mavericks.
Absolutely. So I guess, I spent the past few years building a company and sold it. So I think, every kind of the full circle moment for a founder, definitely kind of exploring my next opportunity. So, excited about what's on the horizon. In the meantime, continuing to write and publish outside of my book, just to kind of keep that habit going. I've been using a lot of AI too to, what they call vibe coding. So I've been building my own apps without honestly any knowledge of developer tools whatsoever. Again, that's what AI is here for, to, kind of equip people with the skills that they didn't necessarily have. So, I built my own app on it. I have a little idea that I want to work on, that we'll see if it comes to fruition or not. But otherwise, if you would like to get a copy of my book, it's called Digital Mavericks. It's available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. I also publish, bi-weekly, I guess, to my publication. I publish it on chain to a platform called Paragraph. And you can find my writings there on paragraph.com/eddebbie.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely be checking that out. Thank you so much, Debbie. This was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. That was such a great conversation with Debbie Soon. I really appreciate her insights on how blockchain and AI are transforming the creator economy. And I love how she encourages people to carve their own path in the Web3 space, no matter their background or experience level. If you want to dive deeper into Debbie's work, please be sure to check out her new book, Digital Mavericks, and follow her writing at paragraph.com/eddebbie, where she shares her thoughts on Web3, digital art, and innovation. Thank you for tuning into the Blockchain Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it valuable. I'll catch you on the next one.